Hey, Vinyl Community, Jeff here again. Time for another thread. This is a thread for Ed. Thread for Ed over on my turntable. He wanted to see 5, no more than 10. I'm showing 5 female. It's a focus on the female artist because, you know, he says basically that, you know, we see, well, and, you know, music tends to be in many ways dominated by men. And so on the VC, there's a lot of male dominance. It's not intentional, I'm sure. It's just, it is, you know, female artists, and it really depends on the style. You know, it's really tough. In my world, see, my world's different from Ed's world as far as musical style. I do come from and focus on more of a rock, hard rock, and, you know, female hard rock bands are more scarce. And so I'm focusing on some of the ones that I really appreciate. I know when it came to harder rock, it was tougher to find female-oriented bands that really cut it. Nowadays, they're everywhere. But yet, I still hear stories of how they talk about how it's tough for a female artist in a man's world. I find that hard to believe. I mean, I'm not saying it's not, but there's so many females out there in heavy metal. I mean, it's everywhere. So maybe it's not, I'm sure it can't be as bad as it was, but it still can be tough. Let's jump into this. Lita Ford, have to mention Lita Ford. What was this, 82, 83, first album. Now, I'm going to admit, at the time this came out, I was totally, pretty much unaware, never heard a Runaway song, did not know of her connection to the Runaways. Lita Ford, she had come out right after Joan Jett. We listened to Joan Jett. I don't think I ever connected her with the Runaways, even though it was only a couple years before. But the Runaways would have been my preteen years, and I just never listened to them. So when I bought Joan Jett, when I bought Lita Ford, it was not because of a connection to or knowledge of the Runaways. I don't think I even really knew anything about them until later. Then you start seeing the Runaway albums in the record bins. You start noticing them, but I can't say I ever got into them or bought them. So yeah, I discovered Lita Ford just because this is not the album that I had at the day. This is the alternative cover. The album I have, which I like to get a copy of still, is the one which got the big chain spider web. She's in the middle, pretty much same outfit, or is it the outfit from the back? And she's like ripping the neck off of a guitar, and there's like what looks like guts and blood coming out of it. That's the one that I got. Love it, love it. So yeah, and then so her first 2 albums, this one and Dance on the Edge, were just straight up hard rock. And then it was around the 3rd album, MTV, all of that, where they started pushing her not only to be more risque in her looks and dancing and stuff, but to be more commercial. She soared. She had mega hits. You're probably familiar with those albums way more than these. It really bummed me out. A few years back, a few decades back, they released a complete collection of Lita Ford's videos. Complete collection. I have a copy of that. Something like that. Complete collection of Lita Ford's videos. Does not have the Out for Blood album song on there. No clue. I'm sure it had to do with labels at the time or whatever. But she had a killer video from this that you only saw on MTV. Very rarely, if ever, on those channels. But we saw it, and anyway, love this album. The first 2 albums are just, a lot different than the stuff that came after that was a little more palatable pop, a little more lighter on the rock side. First 2 albums just straightforward hard rock. Love that stuff. Oh, and he wanted to know, out of the bands, you had to have at least one that you have seen live. I've got 2. I did see Lita Ford live, but it wasn't until just many years later. And she put out a couple albums that were kind of blah, kind of different. In the 90s stuff, bands struggling. And then in 2012, she came back with Living Like a Runaway, I believe was the name, which was a really good album. And I saw her for that tour. She was opening for Poison and Def Leppard. Honestly, I think I went to that show knowing that I was going to see Def Leppard and Poison, but I, for some reason, seemed to think that I was surprised when she came out. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize she was on the bill. So anyway, love it, but I got to saw her, so this was in like 2012-ish, not back in the 80s in the heyday, or not in the big mid-80s when she was huge. So anyway, did get to see her briefly there. All right, this next, this is a full band of females here. As you can see, they were really, oh, wait a minute. That's not girls. Wow, that dude looks like a lady. Little joke there. Anyway, Amy Grant, moving into this. Contemporary Christian artist of the late 70s, early 80s. Unguarded dropped, and it was kind of a crossover album. It got pop, mainstream, the non-Christian artist audience side of things. It kind of broke on. A lot of controversy because the Christians were like, the album's not Christian enough, it's too poppy. The pop artists were like, she's a Christian artist, and so it's kind of like she was caught in that little web there. She went on to do some stuff with Peter Cetera, which, put her more on the mainstream side and took her out of that Christian realm. People started questioning, is Amy Grant still a Christian? Blah, blah, blah. So, but this was the album that kind of started it. Love this album. Was not much into female musicians back then at the day, and definitely not on the pop side. I was never a fan of the pop bands like the Go-Go's and the Bangles and all that. But love this album. My roommate at the time in the military loved this album. We listened to it all the time. I got to the point where I started playing drums to it. So, and then we did see her in concert too. A carload of us, more people than should have been in the car probably, that didn't have enough seatbelts for everybody. We piled in the car and drove over, I'm thinking at least a state away, a few hours, crammed in this car to see her in concert, and then drive back late at night and get back on base. And I remember the fun time with the friends crammed into that car. Not the most comfortable drive, but we had fun, and I did see her in concert, and that was a great time. It was for that tour. All right, and then this one, this was before all of that, before going in the military and seeing Amy Grant. Rock Goddess hit the scene, and this would have been in my high school years. And it would have been, this I believe, this is a U.S. version, which is different, I believe, from the U.K. version. And I think, was it that some of these songs on this version came from their first album? Because I recently picked up their first album, and it seems like I'm thinking that I've discovered that. Because there is a copy of this that's got Medusa on the cover, which is a different cover. The import, this is a U.S. version, which is Be the Import, because they're a UK band, I believe. But yeah, so if you bought the first album and the second album, and then I think this has songs from each, I believe. But anyway, back in the day, we didn't know that. We bought this. I believe they had a video or two on either MTV, or we saw them on those other video channels that came on late at night that showed videos that tended to be where they played a lot of the little more obscure bands. But yeah, two sisters, I believe these two. I don't believe that the sisters stayed in the band the whole time. I think one of them left. They've got a few more albums out after this, I believe. So, yeah, great stuff. There were only a couple bands like that in the hard rock and metal field in these early days. Rock Goddess was one of them. Girl School another. I did not pull Girl School because I don't know. Don't know what. Girl School just dropped a new album, as a matter of fact. Both Steve over at the Harmless Rebel and Scott Waters showed it recently, mainly because Steve sent Scott one of those. But yeah, I checked it out, listened to it online. I thought it's not bad. It's pretty good. So yeah, Girl School's still going around, but I'm not mentioning them because I don't have a copy. I could have pulled one of their albums, but I didn't. Chastain, Roller Wasteland. I pulled this because I showed it in my previous thread where I was talking about 5 bands from '85, and this is the follow-up album. I didn't want to show the same album I showed in that thread, but this was an album. This album, by this time we knew, but on the first album, Mystery of Illusion, there was no pictures of the band, and we bought that album and were blown away by it. Just shredding guitars, amazing, powerful vocals. It was only later, and probably this album, that we discovered that the vocalist in the band was a female. She had a raspy metal voice, not too unlike like a Dio type sound. And, back in those days, all the guys sounded with the high-soaring vocals, that a lot of times they sounded like girls. So you get a girl that comes out there and she's got more of a raspy vocal. It was not hard to figure she might have been a guy. And so we loved that first album. And it was only later that we discovered that's a girl singer. Blew me away. Leather, amazing singer, one of my favorite metal singers of her, for a female artist. And she recently put out an album, just in the past couple of years I showed it. So she disappeared for a while, and then she came back, and she's been making music again and doing some solo stuff. And I think she's done some work with Dave. Dave Chastain's band, Chastain, tended to always, even when Leather left, he got, other female singers in his lineup. So this band has always kind of been female-fronted, whereas he has done other projects under other names, Chastain related, that did not have that. So This is a little one-off, basically, that I bought right before going in the military. Leather Angel, one of these California bands, small label, small production. Didn't know a whole lot about them. The only thing I think we knew a connection was about this was that Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue was dating one of the girls, and I believe he had a connection with how they ended up getting this little label, little record put out. I was so surprised I found this in a local store in such good condition for a decent price. I had this back in the day. Just fun stuff. You know, it's pretty good for what it was. I do believe the band went on to, they changed their name. Was it to Lady Jade or something with Jade in it? And I've heard a lot of those. They had a CD and stuff of that out. And they went on to do more music under a different name, but this is where it started. Leather Angel, all decked out in black and chains there. Interesting stuff. And then a modern artist, Leia. I showed this not too long ago because this is her newest album. She has, half a dozen albums or so. Canadian. Not too unlike a lot of the symphonic metal bands out there that have female artists. They tend to have a female and then they have a rough singing male. This one has no real rough singing male usually, so it's just her, and it tends to be musically more Celtic and symphonic and medieval sounding. So similar, but not so similar as far as the style, but great stuff still. And like I said, she's been doing this for quite a few years now, so check that out. But that's it. 5 female-related, fronted, or related focused artists. Again, check out the video for Ed. I'll link below for that one, and we'll see you later. Rock on and rock hard.